So,
and they keep changing.
Yes.
They
Every
keep
year.
changing.
So you have 10, 12 big changes every single year, like monumental things that like Texas might get once a decade.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what those are probably the two big takeaways of what the really person that we serve as a client. It's a couple of the bigger things. So, but the other big thing that I've really realized is property management is the least sexy part of real estate investing. And no one wants to do that. No one wants to deal with it. So I sold tons of stuff in the first. It was kind of cockamamie. Now I think back, but there wasn't really cash flow back then because the properties were too high and rents were really too low. So the values weren't that high, but rents were really low back then.
Yeah.
And but what I would do is I come to you, Mike, and you might have a W-2 and just want to get out your own rat race in real estate investing. How do I get into it? I'd say, hey, listen, I'm gonna sell you this condo for $100,000. You're gonna hold it for 18 months, and we're gonna sell it for $150. And you're going to be upside down for $100 or $150 a month, but I'll make you the money. Like every time you hear of a horror story about a bad tenant or a dog that destroyed the place, there's always plenty of red flags in the beginning that everyone ignored. People want to blame real estate, tenants, all that stuff, but you just skipped a bunch of things that you knew were there and you chose to ignore, or you just skipped the whole step of looking those things up. The whole 100% or extreme ownership type mentality about everything and anything.
Buck stops with you.
Yep. Almost, people always ask me, how's things going? And I would say, hey, listen, man, every problem I have is either something I haven't, I created or I haven't dealt with yet. So life's not bad. I can control those things.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NewCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Mark Ainley, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about the amazing things that you're doing in terms of helping people with what it is that you're doing. I love the fact that you're giving back the way you are in terms of the value that you're bringing. So thanks again for being here.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on your show. I'm a listener and definitely left reviews in the past. So I've sent specific shows, specific people. So you definitely can cover a lot of audiences.
I'm super excited to learn more about investing and property management and that kind of thing from you. And specifically what you've learned, over the years. So I'm super excited to have you here. So where were you born?
Well, I'm based in the western suburbs of Chicago. So I was born just outside of Chicago. I only left Chicago for a year because I thought growing up watching 90210 and Saved by the Bell, I thought I belonged to California. But I realized shortly after that how much I was only there for about a year, and I realized how much I missed the Midwest. So I came back pretty quick, but been here ever since.
So what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
I didn't realize this. I went to California, but the seasons.
There's none out here.
No. I thought it was weird wearing a tank top, putting up Christmas lights out there. When it's so right now we're recording this in August, and right now, like I went out a couple mornings, and it's a little cooler, and you can smell a hint of fall coming. We still got a few more weeks, but like it's like the hint of the next season coming. Something that I really enjoy about the Midwest.
That's cool, man. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
I think there's a couple different ways I usually answer this question. One, my grandfather, so my mom's dad, he was a high up sales executive in Nestle, never went to college, but he just knew how to carry himself. He knew how to deal with people. He knew his reputation always preceded him. He taught me a lot about the honesty and the whole mindset around you could build your reputation, but by one lie you could lose it all, type stuff like that. So a lot of things that I remember just driving around his old Buick, he taught me that I'll take from me forever. And the other side of that was books and articles. I think he was my one role model, but I didn't have access to too many other successful people in life. So I went to books back then. And ironically, some of the content Donald Trump was putting out in the late 90s and stuff like that. Like those were some of the books that I was reading just to get, I think everything we read and we take in as content, it wouldn't be right if you took everything word for word, but if you took everything that you collect in your mind and put it together and form your own opinion, that was the beginning part of who I am today.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool, man. So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
It was social studies. I always liked. There's something about geography and land, or just the earth, and they tie that in with politics and war and history and all that. Like I think there's just that's so marvelous. Just the last 200 years in this multi-billion year world we live in.
Crazy. So in high school, did you have a favorite teacher?
I had multiple favorite teachers, but the one teacher that I think really rings out for me was it probably would have been I had him for a gym teacher, but he was also my football coach, and he just a lot around the discipline and living in the moment. And the one thing he used to always say about football before the games was, you got 60 minutes and to leave it on the field, which I say to my son now when he runs out to the soccer field. But it's like, man, don't complain when you get done if you're not going to leave it all out there when you're doing it.
That's true. That's a great way to look at it. So what position did you play in football?
Well, I started off my freshman, sophomore year playing free safety, cornerback. But then as I bulked up and, instead of getting into drugs or other stupid things, I got into the gym and I got a little wider, put some weight on. I became more of a fullback junior, senior year.
So difference between defense and offense. What was your favorite thing about defense? Same question about offense.
I think defense is pretty boring till you get the big play. And offense, you could consistently drive down the field, but I always liked the fact that I was always one moment away from picking something off or forcing a fumble. Like that always just got me more excited. And that's more exciting too when you're watching football too, and they're about to score, and it's like, man, there's still a really good chance they can screw this up because the defense does something crazy.
Yeah, and it's amazing how defenses make really good offenses look not so good. Right?
Yeah.
There's something to be said for defense wins championships.
Yep. It sucks. Offense is so exciting, and even with baseball, Cubs. I'm going back to 2016 now, but Cubs and all these different people that in the World Series, it ends up being a pitching duo, and it becomes a defensive duo. It's never very rarely you have World Series games where it's 12-8 or something like that these days.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's usually they're eking out what little number of runs they can manufacture, right?
It comes down to bunts and sacrifice flies.
And, right? Yeah. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. So I saw a video the other day of a major league baseball player on first that, guy hits a infield single, and, he makes it to first base, and the ball's thrown to the first baseman. First baseman acts like he threw it back to the pitcher, waits for the guy to step off, tags him, out. Oh my goodness. That happened this season, dude. This year, right? It happens. It really does. It's like, you got to be paying attention when you're on base,
I'll make a confession here. I'll say this because I know my friends still, I saw my friends a couple weeks ago, and 25 years later, they still razz me for it. We're playing. I was on first. I was pretty quick back then, that sophomore year, and I stole second and got to second, and the second base. When you're running, you just put it right in. You're not thinking. You're nothing. All that matters is to get there. It doesn't matter where the ball is. It doesn't matter anything else. So I slide in, get in there, and second baseman just casually goes, foul ball. So I start walking back. And I got hit by that one. So I was equally as dumb one game, and my friends have never let me forget that one.
Wow. I love that. That's a great story. So after high school, where do you go?
So, after high school, I got it. I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? So I think during high school and early years, I wanted to be something stockbroker, Wall Street, but it was for the wrong reasons. It was for the the way that Hollywood glorified money, suits, New York, Wall Street, so forth. And I quickly realized by talking to a couple people, they're like, you don't want to get into this. The level of stress, it's not what it's like on TV, and the internet's coming, and that it's all going to change. So my next transition was like, all right, it's computers, right? How do I get in computers? So signed up for DeVry and started going there. And I went to community college for 1 year. Did really horrible. It was just too much fun. So I ended up going to DeVry. They had more of a, you do this, and this, you graduate. I kind of like that straight line, went year round, could do it faster, make up some of that time. But about 3/4 of the way through, in the meantime, I was starting to dabble with real estate. I realized, I'm like, man, I looked around. I remember one morning, it was a Thursday morning. I was in statistics class about 2/3 of the way through, and I looked around. I'm like, man, like, it's just very like self-centered, or back then it's like, there's no girls in this class. Like there's nothing, like no one has any personality in this class. I'm like, I can't sit in the back office in some back TCOM room with these people for the rest of my life. I'm like, I got to get out. Like it kind of like made me realize who I am and who I'm not that day. Yeah. So I'm like, I got to finish this. I'm paying it for myself. I already have this much vested. There's definitely not a sunken cost fallacy I was thinking, but I'm like, I just got to finish it. And then, but I realized I liked real estate, and it was an aha moment I had right around that same time that I was laying on my couch one night. I was one of the first friends out of my group of friends that bought a condo. I was 21, and I had 2 bedrooms. And there's one point I was sleeping on my couch, and I had both my rooms rented. More so just because like my friends were coming over and it was inconvenient. So I said, I'm going to charge you. Like it wasn't like any like master landlord real estate investing plan. But that I kind of started off as, I'm like, wow, he's paying me 500, he's paying me 550. That covers everything. And I'm like, oh, this is real estate investing. So quickly my mind shifted to real estate. That was called 2002, 3. And things were looking sexy back then, but again, the internet still wasn't around fully. There wasn't stuff out there. So it was really just, you see what you see, you hear what you hear, signs going up, signs going down, nightly news, stuff like that. But it was all looking really good. And that's where I jumped in.
Yeah, that's cool, man. So did you finish DeVry?
No, I did. I finished DeVry. I graduated cum laude, which I'm not sure how. Maybe DeVry's easy, or maybe I actually zoned in. I'm not sure, but I graduated. I never done anything with it since. And I really got my real estate license shortly after that. I was working a full-time job at the same time too. I did a lot of finding there at a pretty young age, which I'm very grateful for now. And it was just due to experiences around me. I started working at a trucking company that was open 24/7, and the shipping, the tech, the .com boom, 2000, 2001, shipping was crazy. So they let me work as many hours as I want. So I tried working as many as I can, and it was getting $14, $15 an hour. And I tried to get to overtime, so I was making good money, doing some hustling stuff on the side. And but I worked my way up. I worked all the way up to dispatcher, like a manager dispatcher at like 22, 23 years old. But then .com crashed. The economy went down for a while. Shipping definitely stopped. And then I realized in the corporate world how shit really rolls downhill. Sorry if I'm swear. How it all rolls downhill. And I realized, like, oh man. And I remember having to take orders or listen to direction from people 2 layers above. It's like, man, that doesn't even make sense down here on the front lines. Like, how does that even make sense? Like, and I realized he was only doing what he was forced to be doing, and check the boxes he was having to do to be successful himself, or at least maintain. And I realized, man, this corporate world is probably not for me either. So,
yeah. So you make it to dispatcher. .com bubble happens. Right after that, 9/11 happens. Right?
Yep.
Kind of a rough time in real estate.
Yeah, no, it was, but it rebounded pretty fast, at least particularly here in the Chicago market, because interest rates that go down at that point, which at that point, 6 or 7% was
Florida, didn't they?
Yeah, 6-7% was still, people right now, they're like, oh man, they're low. Like, man, this is kind of what it was when I got into it. So this is normal, right? It's all your point of reference. But for me back then, 6-7%, it's like, all right, I'm hearing everyone 15 years older than me saying, oh, you should have seen it in the 80s. And it's like, so I'm like, oh, this is great. I got to figure out how to take advantage of this, thinking it was never go lower. Who would have thought we would have seen 2.5% type stuff 20 years later? But yeah, no. So jumped into real estate, and I had some. I bought my first rental in that time, and I screwed it up majorly. I put a bad tenant. It was really around tenant screening and accept the first sad story. Thought I could help someone, accept a partial security deposit. Did everything wrong. Had to file for eviction. Did a modified cash for keys. And ultimately got out. But I said at that point, I'm like, you know what? I'm only going to sell people these problems. So like, maybe I'll just broker this stuff for a while. So I kind of got out of the investment mindset for a couple of years. But I was selling. The big thing here in Chicago was condo deconversion. So
Mhm.
condo conversion. So it's
Right.
going from apartments to
Apartment to
condos.
condo. Yeah.
Yes. So I would, some of the big players around here, Equity Residential, Inland, some of these companies were coming in and doing these big 200-300 apartment. And I would just get in the beginning, and they did the tiered structure like they do new construction, where it might start at 100,000, and by the time the last phase, you're at 140. So I sold tons of stuff in the first. It was kind of cockamamie. Now I think back, but there wasn't really cash flow back then because the properties were too high and rents were really too low. So values weren't that high, but rents were really low back then.
Yeah.
And but what I would do is I come to you, Mike, and you might have a W-2 and just want to get out of your own rat race in real estate investing. How do I get into it? I'd say, hey, listen, I'm gonna sell you this condo for 100 grand. You're gonna hold it for 18 months, and we're gonna sell it for 150, and you're gonna be upside down for $100 or $150 a month. But I'll make you the money. You're like, cool, I'll take two. And I remember going to some established, much older, sophisticated real estate investors, and I remember walking away and them thinking they tell me in the face, like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I'd walk away thinking like, dude, that guy has no clue what he's doing. And in hindsight, like, it's like, oh man, like I was just very immature at that point, but I made a lot of money. So I built a lot of relationships. I sold a lot of property. I got a lot of reps, right? It's all about reps. And I got a lot of those things under my belt, selling hundreds of those. And that's kind of how property management got born, because I was selling to all these people that are busy doing stuff and they didn't know what to do. So I ended up starting taking management out on the side from that.
So let's back up for just a second, if it's okay.
Sure.
So go back to that first one that you bought, first rental property that you bought. You said that you had somebody who was sort of down on their luck. They were having a tough time. You took a partial deposit. You sort of let your emotions get the better of you, right? And you rented this property out, and you ended up having to go back and you mentioned cash for keys. So for people that don't understand what cash for keys is, can you just walk us through it real fast? Because there are people that are listening to this that have never owned real estate. They might be thinking about it, right? But they haven't owned real estate before. We're in 66 countries worldwide now. And so there are people in, Azerbaijan, believe it or not, that are listening to this podcast. So can you go through just real quick what cash for keys is? Yeah,
for sure. On a side note, I remember going, because I was so desperate to pick up rent from this struggling tenant. I pick up like $57, $72 at a time, I remember, just because I had to make my $600 mortgage. But cash for keys ultimately is where instead of going through the legal eviction process, and we're in Illinois, and Illinois is a little more complicated, a little more tenant-friendly state. Everything takes a little longer. Notices have to sit for a little longer. The better option sometimes for us here, specifically in these more tenant-friendly states, is to simply offer them money to leave, which it kills a lot of people, versus going through the entire legal system, because it ends up being a math problem, right? And we actually built out a math calculator for this at one point for our clients. It's like, all right, so instead of it taking 4 or 5 months to get somebody out, you're going to have all that time cost. It might be the winter by the time you get them out. Give them $1,500 and they'll be out by Tuesday. And you just kind of, now you don't have all that stress. Now you don't have attorney fees, all that stuff. So you're basically buying out of the problem. So do you mind, let's just real quick, if it's okay. And I know it's tedious, but a lot of people don't know what eviction is. So can we talk about sort of, so let's back up. So the cash for keys thing is a way to avoid having to remove a tenant by court action, right? Which is called an eviction. Okay. So what you're saying basically is, in the state of Illinois is, let's call it a blue state just to be safe, right? Yes. And they tend to be a little more, the courts and the laws tend to sway more as a pendulum toward the tenant rather than toward the landlord. In some states, the landlord actually has an advantage versus the tenant, right? And so there are different states, and every state has their own laws. Check your local state's laws, right? But in Illinois, what you're saying is, if you gave them notice to pay rent or quit, which is the typical notice that you give them, right? And they don't pay the rent within that time frame, then you can go, once you've given them that notice and that notice has expired, you can then take them to court. And when you take them to court, you file an actual judicial action, right? That's called an unlawful detainer. An unlawful detainer is just the fact that and what it sounds like is
this tenant now unlawfully has detained this property, and now you're in the process of removing that tenant from that property legally. And so it's called an eviction process. And you go to court, you go through the filings, the court reaches out to the tenant has an opportunity to respond. A lot of times in these bluer states like California, for instance, and Illinois and New York too, you have a situation where a lot of times that response will help to dictate what happens next in the process. And that process can take thousands of dollars in legal fees. There's court costs, the whole thing, and it can take you 5-6 months sometimes. Out here, it can take you a couple of years sometimes to actually remove somebody by eviction. Okay. And whatever your opinion is of those laws and that type of thing, that's a political thing, and we don't go there here, right? We're just talking about what the reality is. So in this case, if you have a tenant that's in that property and they're not paying, and it's going to take you 5-6 months to remove them, you have thousands of dollars in legal fees, you have court costs, you're still paying the mortgage on that property, and that tenant's not paying. And so when you start looking at it as a math problem, it's now several $1,000s, right? Versus you can go talk to the tenant and you can say to the tenant, look, if you're willing to move before the eviction process is finished, if you're willing to move and move earlier than the court would be ordering you to do so, you're going to have costs. What do your moving costs look like? And how can I help you? Would you be interested in moving early if I could help you with your cost? And what will happen is they'll come back to you and say, well, if I stay, if I pay $1,000 a month in rent, if I stay, it's going to be $6,000 that I'm going to save, or 5,000, whatever, right? Except that they're going to have an eviction on their record. Okay. And so all of a sudden now it's a conversation about, okay, how do they cut their losses? And it might be a situation where they are willing to take $1,000 and move out in 2 weeks. You cancel the unlawful detainer process because you already started it, right? And you save yourself thousands of dollars. They move out, you fix the place up, re-rent it, on your way. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So hopefully that helps people that are listening to this in terms of what an eviction process is. Did I miss anything here?
No, I think as a real estate investor, you do it long enough, you're going to run into this situation, and eviction becomes a very emotional part of this. Usually, it's very emotional on the tenant side, and I see a lot of landlords, and including myself over there, is they get pulled into the emotional side of things of principle and all that stuff, where it's just like you said, I said, a math problem of like, hey, what makes most sense to run this business I call my property, and what's the best, cheapest way, fastest way? Because the numbers that people usually don't calculate, and it's hard to put a number to, is the emotional toll it takes on you when you wake up for 122 years every morning thinking like that mofo is still in my unit.
Yeah. Well, and out here they turn it into an enterprise. Right? You talked about renting out your rooms in your condo. They'll rent out the rooms in the house, not pay rent, and collect those rents from those tenants of those bedrooms, right? They're making a bunch of money, and you're interrupting their enterprise if you're in the process of trying to evict them. And we had one that was literally over 2 years because she was coached and she knew legality, and she worked every trick in the book. And I'm pretty sure she had a legal background, but she was being coached, and she did really, really well. The amount of money she made in that 2.5-year period, renting that place out and not paying any rent, is pretty insane. Okay. And it happens in these states where tenant laws are a little more friendly for tenants and that kind of thing. It does happen. So, and you're right. It takes some real adjustment as an owner of investment real estate, right? As a landlord, it takes some real adjustment because it's really a business. When it comes down to it, it's a business. Yeah, you're renting a property out to somebody who's calling that their home, right? And people fall on hard times. Things happen. It does, life's full of curveballs. You mentioned there was a .com bubble. There was 9/11. There were all these things, right? There was the Great Recession in 2008, right? That caught a lot of people flat-footed in our industry, and me included, right? And it took a lot to get through it. Thank you for adding that clarification. I appreciate it. So you end up, so this condo conversion thing is where they take an apartment complex. An investor will buy an apartment complex, and they'll basically go in and they'll remove all the tenants, and they'll remodel the apartment complex, and then they'll subdivide it with the state, where each one of those apartment units becomes a condominium or an actual property that somebody can own. And then they resell those units at a higher number, right? So they might pay $50,000 per unit to buy it as an apartment complex and sell them for $150,000 a unit, that kind of thing. And so it may not be that big a spread, but that's the example, right? So what you were doing was something that a lot of investors did in the early 2000s. A lot of investors did it in the 80s and 90s too, where when a builder takes on a project, they tend to take on a project and they sell on purpose the least favorable located units. Remember, it's location, location, location. They sell the least favorable located units first, and they sell them for less. And it gives them an opportunity to build up momentum, right? And they build up this momentum, and usually if there's 4 phases, by the 3rd phase, they have all the construction financing paid off. The 4th phase is where they make their profit and their investors make their money back, right? And so it's one of those things where if you know that as a real estate investor and you have a project that's brand new and you buy in the very first phase, chances are pretty good in a healthy market that you're going to make some money if you sell at the end of the project, right? At the end of the new home sale. And so that was something you were doing as an appreciation play, right? Over that, year or so, whatever it was. And that's pretty cool that you were able to do that. So you did a lot of that, and you learned a lot about, you basically started a property management company, it sounds like, out of necessity.
Yeah, I think what I took away more from that experience, or what that really kickstarted, was my network. One thing that I really took away from that period of time is, if you make people money, they'll refer you.
Yeah.
Like you could be horrible at anything else, but if you can make people money, they'll always refer you.
They talk
honestly,
about you at dinner parties, right?
Yep. Because now that person is, especially people that want to be in real estate, now they're all of a sudden they're feeling good about being a real estate investor. Yeah. So that was probably one of the biggest things. It's like how important my network is, and those people, and taking care of people in my network. So it's probably one of my bigger. I never realized what my network was worth. I realized partially when I went to California of how I had no network, and then I came back and realized how much of a network I had here already, and how much of an infrastructure I had, and then starting to sell these things and word of mouth, and then talk to people like, hey, someone else would be interested, and huge. So that was probably one of the bigger things I learned coming out of that phase of my career.
So really quickly, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the things that you've learned in the property management business that I know a lot of people are going to want to hear, because there's some wisdom that's going to come from this. We'll be right back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. And we're back with Mark Ainley, and we're talking about your company and talking about your career. And before we left for the break, we were getting ready to talk about you had just started your property management company. You had gone to California and learned that you didn't have a network out there, but you had a network out here. What was the one moment that you sort of realized, I'm in California and I don't know anybody, but I know a ton of people in Chicago. I need to go back.
I didn't necessarily realize that. I realized I was doing nothing with my life. And there was a specific.
What were you doing in California?
trying to find work. Work was a lot harder to find out there. I was trying to be an extra. I was just trying to just do anything, but I kept finding myself going down round paths. But there was a moment, and you'll laugh at this, Mike. I was standing in Van Nuys in a teller line at Bank of America with my final not surety bond, bond that I got from a kid growing up. All the bonds you get to cash it in, savings bonds, cashing it in so I could go out that night. And I'm like, I gotta go home.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing nothing here.
This is not working.
No. So I stood in line, cashed my final bond, had a good night that night, and then I called my dad and then my old boss the next morning. I called my old boss first so that way I could call my dad and say, hey, listen, I'm coming home. I already have a job lined up. You help me move back. So
which old boss?
It was the boss for the trucking company still. I was
Gotcha.
still, so I did transfer the trucking company out to California. That was part of some of the security I had, but I was living up in the Valley, and the trucking company was down in Vernon, California. So kind of industrial city down there. So now on the map, it was only that far from a guy in Chicago, but I have to leave 2 hours before to either be running in or be sitting in the parking lot for an hour.
Right.
Like, I never knew.
Well, actually, the parking lot is the interstate.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Where you were commuting to and from, right? And by the way, we had a gentleman on that ran the city of Vernon.
Okay.
Right? Not too long ago. Might have been when you were out there. I didn't even know Vernon even existed. Right? I had to look it up, man. I'm in Southern California. I'm literally 2 hours from LA. No idea Vernon even existed. Apparently it's a lot of industrial, buildings and all that kind of stuff, bunch of industrial stuff, right?
Yeah.
I had no idea anyway. But live long enough, right? And so you're working in Vernon, and your commute, it's only that far on the map, right? Your commute's a couple hours each way. That probably would have made me go back to Chicago, to be honest with you. Sitting in your car or your truck or whatever, waiting to try to get to work. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I avoid that place like the plague. It's like I can't get anywhere. Right now, if I go at 4 a.m, I figured this out. If I go at 4 a.m, I can actually get places.
I still would run into traffic on the way home, though. They'd have the lane closures. I remember coming home from the bars some nights, and I would sit in traffic. I'm like, I can't get DUI this way, at least.
Right, because they're doing construction at night, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, what's this?
So
that's crazy.
It was really that when I came back, that's when kind of that whole evolution of like, I'm not going to be the corporate guy I thought I was going to be as I excelled up. So that's where I got into the real estate game.
So you get into the property management business. You've now been in property management for how long?
Now it'll be 23 years. So
wow.
2002, 3.
I'll bet you've learned a ton.
Yeah. And I've learned and it's funny though, the last few years. So the cool thing that I love about this industry is there's a huge blue ocean of opportunity, right? I think it's 35% of people have their properties managed by a company like ours, and the rest are all self-managed. And that is a huge opportunity for anyone. If that went up 5%, there's not enough property management companies in the country to support that number of volume of units, let's call it. So that's one thing that's always excited me about property management. But the one thing that I think I've really got on board, and if anything, my message has started being lately is people that hire us. Here, Mike, you can manage your property, self-manage it cheaper than I can. You're going to run over, do this. You're going to do that. You might have a guy that doesn't have insurance. You're going to pay him. That's that. But you're not accounting for your time. And Mike's time is worth hundreds of dollars per hour. And if you're going to pay me $150 a month, or whatever, just say like what you're getting there to overcome the opportunity cost for whatever you could be doing, family, growing your business, doing something else, finding more properties, is huge. So what we sell today, what I think I finally realized, and it's taken me 2 decades to realize, is there's two things: buy your time back and lowering your risk. Because there is a lot of people, especially in a blue state like this, like there's so many different laws, what town you're in, what county you're in, the state. So
and they keep changing.
Yes,
they
every
keep
year
changing.
So you have 10, 12 big changes every single year, like monumental things that like Texas might get once a decade.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what those are probably the two big takeaways of what the really person that we serve as a client. It's a couple of the bigger things. So, but the other big thing that I've really realized is property management is the least sexy part of real estate investing. And no one wants to do that. No one wants to deal with it, but they do. But a lot of times they do it, and they do it half-assed, or they'll keep their rent $400 or $500 below because they have a tenant that they'll do their own maintenance or whatever, but not realizing how much they're really leaving on the table or how hard it's going to be to ever catch them up. And the property management side of it, that's everything. Like, yes, they say you make your money when you buy it, but how much you really make over the term, and how you keep up that property's value for when you do exit eventually, or whatever you're going to do with the property. That's really the 80% of it.
What's interesting to me is the way landlords look at their properties and they look at their tenants. One of the things that we talk about here a lot is our listeners give us feedback, and the feedback that we're getting from our listeners is that they're connecting with you based on your life story. They're connecting with you based on how you grew up, based on who was the most influential person to you, right? We had somebody on the other day that she remembers as a child. She remembers as a little girl going back and forth to the library because their family didn't have any money, and she would come home every time from the library with a stack of books, and she read all the time. Like, she just read. It was her escape. And she didn't watch television. She didn't like most kids sit and just check out or veg out or whatever. She didn't do that. She just kept reading and kept filling, kept fueling her mind, right? And it's amazing how when you talk to people who've achieved at a great level, how you find out where they came from. It's sort of the chicken and the egg thing, right? And what has helped them to determine success, And the thing that sort of shouldn't surprise me at all, because there's such a value in connection nowadays, more so than there's ever been. We're all connected, technically, right? But what people really treasure and cherish is human connection, not the, hey, I'm on Facebook with you, or hey, I'm on Instagram with you. You know what I'm saying? It's the actual connection. And so one of the things that happens a lot of times with landlords is they will establish a connection with that tenant, and that tenant becomes somebody they consider to be like family. They pay them rent every month, all that kind of stuff. They do their own maintenance, like you're talking about, that kind of thing. If they do their own maintenance, it doesn't mean that they did it right. It's just Band-Aid on a hemorrhage, right? And so, they won't raise the rent because they don't want them to leave, because they don't want to disappoint them, because, right? And so all of a sudden they're, for that $400 or $500 a month, and that's legit. That $400 or $500 a month that they're not collecting, right, is a cost of doing business for them. And it affects their lifestyle. A lot of people hold on to these rentals and they use them to fund their retirement. What's $400 or $500 a month less to you when you're trying to retire? It's a lot, right? That's a lot of money every month. Whereas they could pay you $150, charge $500 more, right? They're up $350. Last I checked, I think my math was right, right? But it's one of those things where, $350 a month is a lot of money over time. And so I want people to sort of think about this, that are listening to this, that maybe you're thinking about hiring a property manager. Hiring a property manager keeps you from having that 3 a.m. call about the toilet being stopped up, right? And you have to run over there wherever the rental is, and you have to take care of it for these people, and you have to do it right away. If there's a flood in the house, whatever the situation is, property managers take care of that kind of thing for you, and you don't necessarily get that 3 a.m. call. And if you sit down and actually, like you're talking about, actually do like a log, right, where you figure out how many hours you're spending, how much time you're spending, but also how much energy, what it's all costing, the gas that it's costing you to do it, the amount of resources that you're having to put out, that kind of thing. All of a sudden you start looking at that, and it doesn't make a lot of sense not to hire a property manager.
But 20 hours is kind of what we figure out on a occupied unit on average per year someone's going to spend. And then if it's a turnover year, which we usually say happens 3 times every 10 years, you have 3 different tenants every 10 years. Yeah. Then that could be anywhere from 60 to 100 hours, depending on how many times you got to show it, or how long it sits in the market, or how big that rehab was. So that's a lot of time. And the funny thing is, like, take that turnover year, that 68 hours. for us, it's not, you're not even really paying anything more. Like we don't even charge management fees when it's vacant.
Right.
We have a maintenance company that might make a profit to stay in business, but you're still going to pay that profit to the guy down the street that's going to do the rehab for you that you now have to oversee. So the time back is huge. And I think as I'm getting older, I'm 44, that time, we all have the same amount of time. You hear that often. We all have the same amount of time in the day. It's what we do with it or what we don't do with it. And that's really something that's driven my own decisions internally, but also helped us drive that as a founding factor for our company.
Can I ask you a question? How many conversations are you having with current landlords that don't have their property being managed professionally about peace of mind?
Yeah, so we have the opportunity. So we have a podcast. We have a very hyper local podcast here. We've been doing it for about 5 years, and so we do get a platform in that sense. Now, the flip side of that, Mike, is I will tell you that first time investors, it's not horrible. You should manage your property, understand at least what it is like to do it, and whether it be a year or 2 years, whatever. So, but it's when you're starting to get your career going, and now you got family and all that stuff. The time that you get back, but to self manage, I encourage that so you can see the pain points and what you actually do get in value for when you do hire a property manager. So, I kind of speak out of. It's just really based on where that person's at. But yeah, no, that is, whether it be the platform, Instagram, LinkedIn, like that's been a lot. That's been kind of 80% of my message. Buy your time back, lower your risk.
So what price tag do people put on the time that they would be spending with their family? If they miss a birthday, if they miss, Christmas, if they miss, right? Because here's what happens. And you know this being in property management. When the holidays roll around and when birthdays roll around, right, for the tenant, they tend to have people over. When those people come over, things tend to break.
Yep.
I'm just being honest, okay? On Thanksgiving, they're trying to make a turkey and the stove stops working. The oven stops working, right? This kind of stuff happens, you guys. It happens when you least want it to happen. Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, you with me? And so it's like at some point, where do you draw the line in terms of quality of life?
Yeah, no, you could probably appreciate this, Mike. I think your kids are older. I heard something about a year ago. I don't know if it's Jesse Itzler or who it was, but your kids, the time you spend with your kids, it's like 90% of that time is up until like they're 14 or 15 or some teenager year, and then it's like literally only 10% after that. So it's like all that time, like I want to make sure I take advantage of that, and that's kind of what I preach to anyone that's out there because it goes too fast. No matter how many times people tell you when your kids are born, enjoy it, it goes fast. It still goes fast, and you didn't enjoy enough.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true, and I feel the exact same way. Right? I actually made some really tough choices in my life when my children were growing up because I wanted to be that dad. I wanted to be that dad that when my daughter was the captain of the cheer team, she could look up in the stands and there was dad. Right? Now at her home football games, I was the guy in the press box with the microphone doing the play-by-play. Okay. I still am, by the way. We're getting ready to start our season here in a couple of weeks. So, they saw me, right? I was on the board of directors. My wife was the president of the parent volunteer organization, what they call PTA, right?
Yep.
Theirs is called PVO. But she was the president of the PBO. Do you know that my daughter's freshman year in college, she called me and she said, Dad, they had me do a presentation on our family today. And she said, and I wanted you to know that I was standing up in front of the class doing the presentation about our family and something dawned on me. And I wanted to tell you. And I said, what's that? She said, my junior year in high school, we were the perfect family.
That's awesome.
I want every parent to have that conversation with their kids someday. Okay. We were the perfect family. And I said, okay, you gotta tell me why, right? You gotta, it's right. Now I got tears running down my eyes and I'm losing it. Right. But I'm like, what, how? Right. And she said, well, think about it. You were in the press box with the microphone doing the play-by-play. I was on the sideline as the captain of the cheer team. Michael was the MVP of his basketball team, and mom was the president of the parent volunteer organization. Dad, we were the perfect family my junior year in high school.
That's
So
awesome.
I interviewed the founder of their school system. It's a charter school system out here. I interviewed him. He was one of the first people whose life story we got for our podcast. And I shared that with him. And I said, you know what's interesting, Coach? Every single one of those things that made us the perfect family all centered around the school that you founded.
Oh, that's awesome.
It blew him away. Right? But that's what I'm talking about, is it's time as a parent that you invest in your children, right? It's being there. It's when they look up in the stands, you're there. When they come home from a defeat, right? Or they lose big, right? You're there to pick them back up. You're there to answer their questions and help them, sort of put everything back together. Right.
Mike, you want to know what the new problem that people have to overcome is looking up the stands and make sure they're not on their phone. I know I've been called out. So I try to make a conscious effort to put my phone in my pocket or leave in the car. So I might be looking up something for him to buy tomorrow, but no matter what, when they look up, they see you on the phone. Like that means that phone came first. So that's something I've been trying to consciously separate myself from.
You mind if I share something with you?
Sure.
So the other day, my 25-year-old is now a director. She's managing managers. Okay. She's a director with a company, a young company that's up and coming. And she has two phones. She has a personal phone and she has a company phone. And we were sitting at an event and she was sitting next to me and she was working both phones. And I asked her, I said, do you remember your dad using two phones back when you were a baby? And she said, Dad, I'll never forget it. She said, and they used to tell their friends that their dad used two phones at one time. Well, I had deals that I was closing. I owned one of the largest real estate companies, right? And so I had hundreds of agents working for me, and I was the broker of record and the owner, and I was running the company. And so I had deals I was closing. I had people that I was trying to get to talk to each other that wouldn't talk to each other. You know what I'm saying? I mean, all this stuff
broker,
happened.
your babysitter. I know.
Well,
I know.
Right. I mean, you're putting things back together that just got broken, right? And so, they remember that. And when when I was a kid, when I was a boy, I dreamed of being a dad. And one of my dreams was that I would have a son that would be the most perfectly behaved child in school, right? And I would go to their parent teacher conferences and the teacher would just effuse about how wonderful my son was, right? And versus what mine was, which was my parents would go to parent teacher conferences and they'd walk out completely disappointed and thoroughly convinced that I'd never make it to the next grade, right? And it's something about if you just applied yourself, you'd actually get decent grades, that kind of thing. I don't know if you ever heard that, but I heard that a lot growing up. So Michael we have our first parent teacher conference. He's in kindergarten. And so we go to see Mrs. Sanders and we sit down and I said, all right, tell me how awesome my son is. And she said, well, actually, Mr. Litton, your son's the most disruptive child we have in our entire kindergarten class. I'm sorry. I don't think I quite heard you correctly. Do you have the right file? Are we talking about my child? Right? He's like, do you have the right case? Right? And she goes, no, it's your son, Michael. He's the most, what? Right? And so we get into this conversation. I'm like, okay, we need to fix this. Right? And she said, he's fine when he's sitting down, but when they get up to get in single file line to go wherever, lunch or recess or whatever, Michael starts cracking jokes. He wants to be the class clown. And I said, well, he gets that from his mama. Yeah, right. Right. And I said, so Teach, we need to figure this out. So I said, listen, he's always talking about how I have two phones. I said, your phone's over there on your desk. I said, the next time he acts up, do me a favor. I'm going to go home and tell him that you've got me on speed dial. Next time he acts up, walk up to him, whisper in his ear before you punish him, whisper in his ear, do you want to go over to my desk and call your dad right now and tell him how you're acting? And let's see how he reacts, right? So I called her a couple of days later and I said, how'd we do? And she goes, he got right back in line and I've never had a problem with him since.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So, but sometimes having two phones and being on the phone all the time is a blessing, right? Sometimes it's a curse, like you're talking about, right?
Yep.
Now, the last thing in the world you want is for them to look up and you be on the phone. The other thing you don't want is you don't want them looking up and you're not paying attention, right? Like you're talking to somebody else that's sitting next to you and you're all involved in that conversation. You don't want that. You don't want that, right? So, but anyway, yeah, it's but it comes down to time, right? It comes down to how available you are as a parent. And I think when you're talking to these landlords, if you're having a conversation with them about how valuable time is and how valuable it is to be able to be where you say you're going to be when you say you're going to be there, right?
Yep.
And you can sleep at night, the whole thing, right? How do you put a price tag on being able to sleep at night? That kind of thing, right?
Yep.
So how important are your assets to you? That kind of thing. So anyway, I love the fact that you've learned as much as you've learned. What are the top 3 things, the most important things that you've learned in the last 23 years?
Is this business specifically or just in general?
Well, I was talking about business, but we can talk general too.
So I think some of the bigger mantras I live by is what you do today or don't do today affects what you do tomorrow or don't do tomorrow. So I feel like, especially being an entrepreneur, like there'll always be things that to stay on top of things. So that's a big one for me. I've also learned when it comes on the property management side, on the real estate investing side, ironically, 80% of the effort goes into the screening part. So we're big. A lot of what I talk about, I present on around the state is on tenant screening and all different technologies and all these things you could do. Like every time you hear of a horror story about a bad tenant or a dog that destroyed the place, there's always plenty of red flags in the beginning that everyone ignored. People want to blame real estate, tenants, all that stuff, but you just skipped a bunch of things that you knew were there and you chose to ignore, or you just skipped the whole step of looking those things up. I think the tenant screening part is big. That, and then I think the third thing is, as an entrepreneur, solo entrepreneur running an enterprise, whatever it might be, I think most of the time that you're stuck or you're not growing is usually 100% your own fault. We're always our own worst enemy when it comes to getting things done. I think on a separate note, just decisions and the amount of time between deciding to do something and actually taking the action. I think that's a huge thing I see, whether it be real estate investors or business owners make. Just that time, that time in between. But I just think that it's uber important to be able to really check yourself and be able to look in the mirror and be like, man, this is all my fault. The whole 100% or extreme ownership type mentality about everything and anything.
Buck stops with you.
Yep. Almost, people always ask me, how's things going? And I would say, hey, listen, man, every problem I have is either something I haven't, I created or I haven't dealt with yet. Mm-hmm. So life's not bad. I can control those things.
Yeah, that's cool. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
No, man, I'm just super grateful I got to come on here and hang out with you. You've been a great host. So thank you.
Thanks. So if somebody's looking to hire a property manager specifically in your area, right around the state of Illinois, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely. You can find me on either LinkedIn or you could find me on Instagram, Mark Ainley, REI. If you Google up property manager Chicago, there's a good chance we'll come up as well too. So GC Realty Development. So thanks, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity.
You, thanks for being here. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.